everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Economist Intelligence Unit's Global Outlook. My name is Agathe Demarais, and I'm the Global Forecasting Director at the Economist Intelligence Unit. I'm joined today by Adeline, VanHoutte, an analyst in our Europe team, and Mario Bikarski, a research analyst also in our Europe team. And today we're going to discuss the rollout of corona vaccines in Western Europe and Eastern Europe. So actually, Adeline, I'm going to turn to you to start to discuss the rollout of coronavirus vaccines in Western Europe. I think it's fair to say that there's been a lot of controversies in many Western European countries about the rollout of coronavirus vaccines, which started about a month ago. So how is the campaign going so far?
Yes, so the EU's coronavirus vaccination campaign has had a slow start. This is in part because of the procurement system and the authorization process. So in terms of the procurement system and strategy, the EU has a central system, and this system requires a lengthy sign-off by most member states. And in terms of the strategy, the EU initially bet on a basket of different vaccines, and within this basket, only 2 vaccines have been authorized so far. And this means they had only a small number of vaccines to start the inoculation process. So aside from this procurement system, the EU also has a lengthy authorization process. So for example, the biotech Pfizer vaccine received emergency authorization 19 days after the UK and 10 days after the US. That said, supply is not the main hurdle for Western European countries. So in theory, the EU has already secured enough doses of the 2 approved vaccines to inoculate about 80% of this of its population, but I agree there's kind of a lack of transparency in the timing of the delivery of these doses. But member states should receive enough to be able to vaccinate priority groups, which account for about 44% of the total population by end March 2021.
Actually, since you mentioned this, there are a lot of controversies at the moment. I know in France there are many about hidden stocks of vaccines, with people asking, where are the vaccines? Why are only a few people have been inoculated so far? Can you explain why some EU countries seem to have injected only a small share of the doses that they have received so far?
So I don't think it's a question of hidden stocks, but there are disparities in inoculation rates across different countries within the region. This is primarily due to different levels of preparation by national and local authorities, distribution bottlenecks, and different rollout strategies. So for example, you have countries such as the Netherlands and France, which have shown slow progress in inoculating their populations. For France, this is partly owing to a deliberate strategy choice. So there are very high levels of vaccine skepticism in the country. So as a result, France has decided to start the vaccine rollout with a lengthy consultation system. And this delayed the process by 4 to 5 days. Then you also have countries with lack of trained nurses, such as Spain, or countries like the Netherlands, which only started vaccinating on January 6th. And this is mostly because of storage issues. Then you also have countries like Denmark. Denmark is performing relatively well, and this is mostly because of low vaccine skepticism and a robust logistical preparation. But it's interesting because the example of Denmark shows that the procurement and the authorization process are not the only reasons for this slow start in Europe. But this is also creating pressure to accelerate vaccination plans at the national level, especially as the EU is now facing the spread of new, more transmissible variants of the coronavirus.
Actually, that leads me to my third and final question. Why is there so much pressure for EU countries to roll out their coronavirus vaccines?
But this is basically because the faster vaccines are rolled out, the faster the economy can be reopened. But this is also because this slow progress has been combined with tightening of lockdown measures in several countries. So this creates frustration and increased pressure. And the bad news is that in the medium term, when the focus of the vaccination will shift to the wider population, we can expect renewed logistical challenges. And this in turn will spark tensions again.
Thanks so much, Adeline. That was a very, very great summary of the situation in Western Europe. So I'm going to turn to you now, Mario. My first question will be, who has the slow start of the vaccination campaigns in Western Europe had an impact on Eastern Europe, and how is the region faring comparatively with Western Europe?
Thanks, Agathe. So the more lengthier process of giving emergency authorization, as well as logistical issues, have also impacted eastern parts of the EU. We see similar trends as in Western Europe in terms of vaccination speed. And we do not expect that that Eastern EU member states will fall behind or outperform the rest of the EU. And we expect them to reach widespread vaccination by late 2021. Of course, there are some countries that are currently better placed than others. For example, Slovenia is the clear outlier in terms of vaccination speed, having vaccinated more than 2% of its population. Also, some of the Baltic states, Estonia, Lithuania, as well as Romania, are above the EU average, while Bulgaria remains the slowest vaccinating country in the EU. Logistical issues on the national level will be one of the main challenges before the Eastern EU member states could reach the desired widespread vaccination, which will allow governments to lift lockdown restrictions. However, we expect governments to leave only some restrictions in place once vulnerable groups have been vaccinated. Even outside the EU, we see similar vaccination strategies and also similar issues when it comes to the pace of immunization.
And actually talking about outside the EU, what is the situation in the rest of the region? How is it performing compared to the EU?
Well, so far, vaccination rollout outside of the EU in the rest of Eastern Europe has been slow, and only a handful of countries have actually begun administering the vaccines. Russia, for example, was the first globally to authorize a vaccine for emergency use. Its own locally produced and developed Sputnik V. However, vaccination in Russia has been comparatively slow when we look at the rest of the region, and we believe that production delays, as well as the vast size of the Russian territory, low population density in some remote areas, it will create problems as widespread vaccination is when we're looking towards the widespread vaccination. Among other countries that have begun administration of the vaccines, we have Serbia and also Turkey. Turkey began administering the vaccines a bit later than the rest of the region, but has so far quickly gained pace and now has vaccinated about 1% of its population. But we're expecting deliveries problems there as well, as more countries begin ordering vaccines later in the year. The rest of the region significantly falls behind with the Western Balkans and the region of the Commonwealth of Independent States facing not only logistical but also technological and financial constraints. The risks to widespread vaccination are more pronounced in less developed economies in the region, and we expect vaccination in some countries to be achieved, widespread vaccination to be achieved as late as 2023.
That's really late. And actually, you mentioned logistical issues. What are the other potential issues, and how will the poorest countries in the region be affected?
So most of the countries in the Western Balkans and the CIS are COVAX eligible countries, which means that they will rely on the COVAX scheme to receive the necessary vaccine doses. However, considering the production and delivery delays that we are expecting, as well as the still very limited global vaccination portfolio, there are risks that these COVAX doses will reach these countries quite late. An interesting example is the Kyrgyz Republic, which was offered the first doses of Pfizer and BioNTech vaccines, but the health ministry announced that the country is very ill prepared, considering the lack of refrigeration technology, and probably they will need to rely on other vaccines when they become available. Another issue that was already mentioned is the low levels of public trust in the vaccines. Russia has so far the highest rate of vaccination of people willing to take the vaccine. More than half of its population say that they're unwilling to take it. So this will also delay initial efforts to start vaccination before the government can employ a clear strategy of how to raise public trust. Overall, there is a clear disparity between the region's more and less developed economies. and there are significant downside risks to vaccination efforts throughout Eastern Europe. However, as most countries have adopted vaccination strategies that prioritize vulnerable groups, we believe that a large part of the restrictions could be lifted before widespread vaccination is achieved.
Thanks so much, Adeline and Mario. I think it was a very, very fascinating topic. And actually next month, we'll discuss the same topic, but in other regions across the world, such as the Middle East and Africa and Latin America. We're at the end of our video now. You can always find our latest analysis on www.eiu.com. Keep an eye on our latest white papers about the rollout of coronavirus vaccines across the globe, or the impact of the pandemic on migration and remittances. You can also find our latest analysis on Twitter at the EIU, or on our personal Twitter accounts and our handles should show nicely on your screen. Thank you very much for joining us, and see you next month. Thank you. Goodbye.